Well, thank you so much for joining, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on resume writing tips for CFOs. For those of you who I haven't met and you don't know me, I'm Chris Schneider. I'm the Regional Director for CFO Recruit in the US. I'm joined today by Phil Scott, who is the Managing Director of Exec Recruit Group. I'll give you a bit of an intro to me, and then I'll hand over to Phil to introduce himself. So I've been recruiting senior finance professionals for, about 15 years, and I've worked in recruitment for about 25. For the last 3 years, I've been based in Florida, which is actually quite cold today in Florida, building our US operation. I can see a couple of nods. So yeah, that's me. I'll pass across to Phil so he can just do a quick intro and then we'll get started.
I'm Phil Scott. I'm global sort of MD at Exec Recruit Group. I've been recruiting directors of finance and CFOs for nearly 25 years now. And I was just thinking earlier today how many resumes we probably have read over the years. I'd probably say we probably view at least 1,000 a month. So times that by the number of months and number of years we've worked in recruitment. We're all good at maths on this, and you get to quite a large number. So hopefully we'll have a few tips for you today. What I would say is a lot of what you hear today will probably be stuff that you already know, and it'll probably just reconfirm if your resume is structured correctly. If you come away with one or two tips and advice, then that's been a time well spent. So back to Chris, and she'll go through some of the presentation.
Thanks. Just as a precursor, so I don't know if everyone's familiar with CFO Recruit, but as a business, we specialize in the placement of finance leaders, whether that's CFO, VP of Finance, Finance Director in title, and we work with businesses across North America. We place candidates in full-time, part-time, direct hire, permanent positions, and we also deal with interim and fractional engagements as well. So as Phil said, I probably review, as a team, we review hundreds of CVs, resumes every week. And so we just wanted to share some insight with you on our thoughts. So let me just share my screen and bring up the presentation that I've prepared. Can everybody see that? Can you give me a thumbs up to let me know if you can see it, Phil?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. So, yeah, let's just cover what we're going to, go through what we're going to cover today. So I've prepared some stats on CFO applications and also some changes in how the application process has evolved over time. Some tips on how to structure a compelling resume so that you can stand out in an application process. Some useful resources via the CFO Recruit website that we'll share with you. And then we have reserved some time for Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions throughout the presentation, pop them in the chat and we'll address those as we get to the close of the presentation. So in terms of the statistics, 11,000 applications a minute via LinkedIn, albeit they're not all CFO roles, but it gives you an idea of how active people are on the platform. This is from our own experience. We posted a remote interim CFO engagement, and within 48 hours, we'd received 1,200 applications. Average 200 applications for a full-time on-site CFO position, and it can be quite a bit north of that, depending on the location. Obviously, as we've become more automated, as a society, people are using AI more frequently. 83% of employers are planning to use AI for initial resume reviews by the end of this year. 96% of US hiring professionals are using AI, usually for the screening and analysis process. And 87% of companies have already adopted AI in recruitment. So you can see there that there's quite a lot of competition, for positions. I think certainly with the easy apply button on platforms like LinkedIn, and the process is becoming more automated. So what we want to do is share with you today how you can stand out through your resume and what to include on the resume that will get you through those earlier screening processes. I think the first thing to say is a resume, it's not just a biography or a list of jobs that you've undertaken. as a CFO, it needs to be a strategic marketing tool. It needs to demonstrate where you add value and the impact that you bring to the organization that you're working for. So I thought it'd be a good way to structure this by kind of addressing some questions that we're often asked. How long should my resume be? Different schools of thought on this. I think a good rule of thumb is sort of 2 to 3 pages. Clearly, if you've had a career of 25, 30 years as a CFO, it's difficult to fit everything on 2 to 3 pages, but you can summarize earlier career and keep that pretty brief. I think the key thing to mention here is it's quality over quantity. It's the content that's really important. Should I include a cover letter? Again, I say, some people read cover letters, a lot won't. Certainly if I'm, if I've got sort of 200, 300 applications for a role, I don't have the time or capacity to read a cover letter with every single application. Again, the important thing to mention here is don't put things in a cover letter that aren't in the resume. Some people will say, well, I have a one size fits all resume, and then I'll say in the cover letter why I'm a good fit for that particular role. But if someone's not reading the cover letter, it could end up being in a pile of people that are rejected for the opportunity. So whatever's in the cover letter needs to be in the resume. It's not going to go against you to include one, but just account for the fact that not everyone will read them. What's the best format? So we've prepared can everybody see this? It's a sample resume that we've put together because we thought it would be a good way to show you how it should be formatted, and also, importantly, what you would include on the resume. Obviously, there's quite a lot of sections on here, and I'm not saying that everyone's going to read every section. Certainly at the earlier stages of the process, when we're working through sort of 200, 300 applications, we're not going to read an executive summary word for word. However, as you progress through the process and you're one of 5 on a shortlist, a CEO might well read everything on the resume. So it's really important, I think, that these sections are included. Obviously, at the top, we've got name and then professional credentials. So if you're MBA, you want that to be evident at a quick glance. Address doesn't need to be full address, but location, phone number, email address, and LinkedIn profile. The executive summary, I mean, it used to be like an objective statement of what I'm looking for in my next role. That's kind of not what it is anymore. And I think it's important to include, I like to think of it as an elevator pitch in print. This is highlighting who you are as a CFO and where your experience lies. So number of years of experience, sectors that you've been involved with, and some kind of headliners on, M&A execution, turnaround experience, 5 or 6 lines that really say who you are as a CFO. Core skills, I like these sections because I can see at a glance the areas of expertise that this CFO brings. It's a good summary. If I'm looking for somebody who's had experience within M&A and due diligence, it's quite your experiences. I think the most important part of the resume, certainly for me, and I tend to go straight to professional as experience because I want to see what's this person been doing. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I've just had a note to say my internet connection's unstable.
Yeah, you went out for, I don't know, 10 seconds on my side.
Hopefully I'm back.
Yeah, you're definitely back.
All right, cool. Thank you. So, yeah, professional experience. I tend to go straight to the professional experience to see what's this person doing now and then kind of work back. So I would have this in reverse chronological order. You need to include on there the dates that you've been employed with this particular organization, the name of the company, the location, and obviously the job title. And just a quick side note on job titles. Some companies have weird and wonderful job titles that are only specific to them as a business. It doesn't mean anything to the outside world, and it just is a barrier because someone's trying to figure out what does this person do. If you're to all intents and purposes a CFO, put CFO on there because it's a quick, okay, this person's a CFO, whereas a different job title might be confusing. Equally, you might be with an organization and they just don't have C-level job titles, but you're VP of Finance, you are their CFO. You're within your rights to have VP of Finance and then in parentheses, CFO. because again, it shows that you're the number one in finance for that organization. The next bit here is a summary of the organization. And this is really key for me because oftentimes we'll be given a mandate by a client and they'll say, we're looking for a CFO who's worked in businesses up to 300 million in revenue. They have experience within the SaaS sector and they've operated across North America. If you have a company on there that I'm not familiar with, I then need to go and research the company. What does the company do? How big are they? What's the ownership structure? It just adds more barriers into you getting onto that, yes, we want to speak to this person pile. So a brief summary of the organization here that highlights what they do, who owns them, and the revenues is really helpful. And it could be the difference between you being shortlisted for interview and not. Next step, we've got key responsibilities. Just to say here, I think key achievements is the key part for me because it shows where you add value. It shows the positive impact that you have on an organization. That said, you may be the first kind of screening phase might be by someone in talent acquisition. They're not used to recruiting CFOs and they're literally looking at a job description and saying, right, we need someone who's got ABC. They're looking for evidence of ABC on the resume. So the key responsibilities is equally important because as you can see here, it tells us exactly what your main responsibility is. Lead finance function, overseeing FP&A, accounting, tax, treasury, and investor reporting. It's very clear what this CFO does. So 5 or 6 bullet points on your responsibilities and then separate out the achievements because this then is really evident. And the achievements need to be quantified. As a CEO, if I'm looking to recruit a CFO, I'm going to think, okay, I want someone who's going to save me time, save me money, drive revenue, increase EBITDA. And this is where you highlight evidence of that achievements. So you can see here, led a successful 80 million acquisition, including valuation modeling, due diligence, and post-merger integration, reduced monthly close from 15 to 6 days by streamlining reporting processes and implementing automation. Other examples are, reduced operating expenses by 18% year on year through renegotiation of vendor contracts. You can see that you're highlighting the achievement, but you're also talking about how that impacted the business. And think about the headline for that as well. Let's say you worked for a 200 million revenue business and you've cut costs by 3%. That's $6 million. What sounds better, $6 million or 3%? Think about how you position that to bring the most value. So we would replicate that for probably, the last 4 or 5 positions. As I said, just use your judgment when you've worked, as a CFO for a number of years, and you can summarize the earlier career bit. And then if we move down to education and professional credentials, obviously you want to highlight, and everybody puts it on there, but CPA license, I would say, the state that you receive the license in and when, and equally with a master's or bachelor's, the institution name, the year you graduated, and some people also include the grade point average on there as well. And there are, as you all probably well know, CEOs that will even specify the type of university or institution that someone's graduated from. So community and leadership. So there's a bit of debate as to whether you include kind of hobbies and interests on a resume. I think certainly at the executive level, it's less relevant and more relevant to include some bullet points as we have here that demonstrate who you are as a person. So we see a lot of people listing any volunteer positions where they've supported nonprofits as a treasurer. Like on this one, we've got a mentor for emerging leaders program. I really like the avid marathon runner one because it's something that's unrelated. But you can make the point, I've completed 5 major marathons, applying the same discipline and endurance as I do to professional leadership. It really shows, that this person's committed, disciplined and dedicated because, running 5 marathons takes all of those characteristics and then you would apply those as a CFO. So I like to put those in there as well. Okay, so we've talked about how long the resume should be. Whether you include a cover letter, the best format, and what you should include on there. The other thing to bear in mind is how you can make sure that it's compatible with an ATS or applicant tracking system. When you apply for a position through a recruiter or a talent acquisition team, oftentimes that resume will be parsed onto their system. You might not be a fit for this particular role, but we want to be in contact for future opportunities. And if you have weird and wonderful formatting, it can completely get lost in translation. So I thought it'd be helpful to kind of highlight some do's and don'ts that will help in that process. So as you saw from the template that we had there, clear section headers. So if someone is, the reality is if you're looking over sort of 500 resumes, I'm going to do a quick 30-second scan. And I usually will then say, okay, these are people that I want to review further, and I'll spend more time reviewing the resume as we go. So clear section headers, it makes it easy to navigate. Include your LinkedIn profile. The number of times I've presented a shortlist to a client, and then when we've kind of debriefed, they've checked the LinkedIn profiles of the candidates on the shortlist. And they'll comment, someone had great recommendations on there. Obviously how you structure your LinkedIn profile is a separate session. But one point to make here, make sure it's a mirror of your resume, because we've had clients say, well, there's 2 roles on their LinkedIn profile that don't feature on the resume and the dates don't add up. And it just raises questions and, concerns, I guess, because there's, differences. So just make sure that the 2 are aligned. As we said, the early stages of these screening processes are becoming more automated, and it may be that, the systems are looking for keywords. You may think, what, I'm a CFO. It's obvious I do financial reporting, forecasting, but a machine isn't connecting the dots and saying, okay, this person's a CFO, they've done all these things. It's important to have those keywords in there so that you will be picked out if there's an automated process. And equally, as I said, if it's a more junior person in the talent acquisition team, they're going to be looking for those keywords. So really important to have those in there. Align your resume with your next step. So I always say to anyone who's going through career progression, start with the end in mind. Think about where you want to get to and what steps are going to get you there. And I think it's the same with your resume. We've had candidates who have worked their career in for-profit. They want to make a transition into not-for-profit. So having any experience on there where you've worked with nonprofits is really important, because obviously it's going to help you align you with your next step. So some of the don'ts: don't use complex formatting and graphics, no photos or logos, fancy templates or designs, because what you'll find is when that resume is to an applicant tracking system, that formatting can completely lost. And there are times where it can just be like a whole block of text. So it just becomes really difficult to decipher because it's just text words and you don't know where anything starts or ends. So just something to bear in mind as you're preparing your resume, thinking about future opportunities that might come your way. And this is another one where, we get this feedback pretty regularly from a client. Certainly if someone's recently stepped up into a CFO position, they're still sort of thinking, about more like a controller. So it's not as strategic a document as it should be. So just make sure you write your resume like a CFO, not a controller, if you're targeting CFO positions, obviously. And then we touched on this as well, including too much early career detail could end up with a resume that's like 10 pages. Just summarize the earlier career. And as I said before, it's quality, not quantity. Next one, and this is probably the biggest one for me. And I've, had this debate with many people. They're like, well, I don't want to have 15 different versions of my resume. But I really think the investment in tailoring the resume to suit a specific position is going to pay dividends. You're going to get a return on the investment, because as we've discovered, you could have junior people reviewing the resume at the first stage. You could have a machine that's looking for keywords. If the job description for the role that you're applying wants X, Y, Z in experience, you need to make sure that it's on the resume. And I often recommend, when I'm screening with people and we're putting them forward for a position, do you think it's a good idea? And the people that do take the time to really tailor the resume are generally the ones that will get through to an interview with the client. So it's worth investing the time. So what we've done, I'm going to pass over to Phil in a second, is we've created a way for you to adapt your resume using the template. So Phil's going to kind of walk you through that process. But I guess before you do, Phil, is there anything that I've forgotten that you want to expand on, that I've spoken about, or that you think is worth mentioning?
No, I mean, just to sort of emphasize a lot of the points that you've made there. A lot of people will ask, how long should the resume be? Length isn't so much an issue if it's laid out correctly. So just to push on your points of splitting every job role into two parts of the responsibility section and the achievement section, because as Christine said, you have two types of readers. You've got the human resources and talent acquisition who are probably matching keywords on a job description with key responsibilities that you've done. But in reality, the CEO, the executives are interested in the value add and the achievements that you've delivered in an organization. But and definitely just to emphasize that the resume is the most important document. The cover letter is a bit of a sideshow. And you've got to make sure that everything is in your resume. If you want to use the cover letter to highlight certain things, do, but not instead of. It's got to be in as well. And when anyone is reading a CV, a resume, probably like you guys who will have recruited teams, you're interested in the career history. So the rest of it is, it needs to be there, but you are probably going to dive straight into the career history. What skills and what work history is this person bringing to my organization that I can utilize? Once you've satisfied that, then you may read the other parts in the resume in terms of the qualifications. So definitely make sure that is, is the most important bit. And the length, isn't as important if you are chapterizing each job role, because people can just dive in quite easily to the sections of the resume that they require and that they want to read. So then they won't be bothered if it's 3 or 4 pages, depending on the length of your career history. So how this can be an exercise. A lot of the resumes that we see are pretty well structured. So I'm going to share my screen and just show you how you can use maybe AI and our template just to see if it can be improved in any way. So this is going to be a live show. It's not going to be perfect, but let's see how we get on by using. I'm going to use Chat GPT and also Claude as well, so that you can see a couple of different LLMs, a couple of versions of the AI. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a prompt, and I will release these prompts to you. So I'm going to paste a prompt that we have created here for this very session. It's quite a long one. It's grown arms and legs as I've been utilizing it. I'm going to paste that in. And then what I'm going to do is attached. I'm on the paid version, but I think it does work equally as well on the free version. Christine did say that sometimes there's a limit of the amount of documents you can add, and it can be limited to 1 on the free version. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste a resume in. Let me just find my resume event section, and I will open this up just to show you the pre. So we'll use one of the sample resumes. This isn't a real resume. This is one that we've made just for the purpose of this. So I'm going to just add that in, and I'm going to add the sample resume as well. And then we'll see what it does. It will ask me some questions. We do want it to ask questions, otherwise it'll just go and rewrite the whole of your career history and make it up, and it'll be fabricated. So it will give us some options. So I'm just going to add the template as well. And then what I'll do is I'll just open up. This is the resume that we're going to use. So this is the pre-converter. So it's not particularly a bad resume at all. My favorite out of the two is Claude, so I'll just show you the chat, which is the common one. So I'm just going to click on that. Just going to think about it for a second. In the meantime, I'll just go into Claude and open. Let's get Claude set off as well, because that can take a little bit of time. So I've pasted in there the instructions. For some reason it adds it as a document, but we don't need to worry about that. Upload a file. I'll just add document 1. And then I'll set that off. So that's got the instructions. So I'll just go back to chat. So it's asking me some questions. How should I display the qualifications? I'm just going to give it option 1 as the answer to that. But again, it's quite good that you can, if I can spell, it's quite good that it will ask you various questions. In the meantime, well, it might be generating that. I'll go over to Claude and see what it says. Yeah, Claude is a little bit slower, which is why I want to run the two side by side. It will take a little bit of time. So I'll just put retained. It's asking me whether we want this bit retained, whether you want it in or not, which is personal choice. And it'll ask me, would you like to include section, community and leadership? I'll just paste that and say, ask it to include. Now, I do find that ChatGPT is like a naughty little child. We've given it about 20 different things in the prompt, and it's asking about that. Would you like me? It's probably got none on the. I'll just put only if they are there. Okay, just give it further instruction. Yeah, what I found when I've been testing this prompt is it's got about 20 different things it's asking it to do. It'll probably do 18 of them, and then you just have to touch it up. It'll make 2 or 3 minutes. It'll touch it up, and each time I use it, it admits doing 2 or 3 different things each time. So I've tried to add further instruction to the prompt, which is why it's so long to get it to do it exactly. Create file. So Claude takes a little bit longer, but I think it goes straight into more often than not. Okay, so the one in Claude is ready, but I'll show you the chat version first. So after the event, we will send you a resume template and the prompt instruction, and for you to have a play with it and see if it changes your CV for the better.
I think, it's like AI with everything, isn't it? It gets you kind of 80% of the way there, and then you are going to have to tweak and just check that it's not adding things in that are kind of fabricated. But it's doing kind of a good proportion of the job for you.
So what I find with Claude, I'll go and look at the Claude document now. Just click download. Hopefully that appears in a second. Try and open it up in full Word document. I'm just moving the bars as we speak. Okay, it's just opening up. So I'll click enable editing. So the bits I would tidy up on this version, just to give you the overview, I won't do it now, is I would probably just try and get these onto one line each. So I might pull them, the second bullet point slightly to the left, just or as a minimum, I'd drop the longer bullet points to the bottom. But it's looking quite good. Now, what it's done on this document is it's actually What you find with Claude, it will try to add in through its knowledge bank and expand a little bit. So the template that we used, the Sarah Rodriguez template, it didn't have it split into key responsibilities and key achievements. So it's put some improvisations in there. So you will need to read it to see that you're happy. I do find that the content it does add is better, whereas the chat GPT tends to just use your existing resume and not add anything extra in, unless you ask it to, of course. So just scrolling down, and chat sometimes will miss the only do half of your resume, and then you'll just have to ask it to redo it, including the whole of it there. So it's not a bad, just a few tabs that we would do there, really, a bit of margin and editing, but it's not really bad effort. To be honest, we'd probably touch that up. We could do that in less than 5 minutes, and then obviously you'd read that yourselves. So let's go back to chat and see where that's up to. So it's got me a link there. This will probably have done it more word for word, but there's always a little bit of extra formatted. So we would need to move the bullet points across a little bit there. And then I would be getting these across just so they stand out. I have played with the prompt so many times to ask it to do that first time, but it just doesn't want to do it. So a couple of quick edits that you would do on that, and so on and so forth. So I won't go through the whole of that. But again, not a bad effort. So we will send these over for you to have a play with. I have another document for demonstration, but I think they're on sleep mode. Now, Christine mentioned something about tailoring your applications. One thing that I have seen people do is add the resume and a job description and ask it to rewrite it. So to tailor it towards the job description. I've seen some really good cases where that has been you've been very successful and it's done a really good job. But I have seen some cases where it will rewrite your resume with things that you haven't done and just grab things from the job description. So you've just got to be careful of that and read it through. So it can be very, very, very successful. I was going to do a demonstration of that, but I don't want to have any lawsuits and advocate that that's what you should do. I just know that people have done it and it's been quite successful. So I want to have that as part of the demonstration today. But that's a lot of what we've got to cover. We'll go to some questions in a second. One of the one that someone submitted prior to the event was asking about the length of a resume, particularly if you've done fractional or interim positions. What I would say is your resume is going to be a little bit longer. I have seen resumes that can be up to, well, I've seen them, 10 pages long. But what I would say is if it goes up to 5 pages or 6 pages, you sort of, that's probably the most you'd want to see. And you would then split it into 2 different parts where your current and most recent experience has got to be the emphasis. So you will want to put in your fractional positions and the interim positions, and then you'll start to condense the earlier career history as that becomes less relevant and less current. Now, there is a big discussion on the fractional or the interim side is how long should that be? Quite a few people will summarize and just say various interim positions covering the following types of responsibilities. The only issue with that is there's nothing for anyone to sort of it doesn't provide enough evidence. So if people want to know that you've done a fractional interim role in a similar size organization handling similar duties, so if you've only got 3 or 4 positions, you may want to give them as much airtime as what you'll see are being given to the permanent roles. And then obviously the latter half of your resume will probably start to shrink your permanent career history as time dilutes that. Would you concur with that, Chris?
Yeah, and it's actually, I see people just put, the name of the organization through which they provide interim support, and then they just do a summary. And my question is always, can you be more specific? Because I want to see evidence of engagements that they've actually undertaken. So I think if you can put a selection of projects on there, I think sometimes people are like, yeah, they said they've been a consultant for the last 3 years, but what have they been doing? There needs to be some content on there to kind of evidence, what you've been doing during that time. That's just feedback from clients.
Yeah.
So I agree. Should we have a look at some of the questions?
Yes. So if anyone's got any additional questions, just fire them in and we'll get through. We won't spend all the time on them, but we'll pull out any of the ones that we find are quite common. So I think one of the questions with the favorite AI, I do find Claude slightly better for content than chat.
Have you used Grammarly, Phil? Scott was asking what we think of Grammarly AI.
Not since AI. I've only ever used it for punctuation, so can't really comment on that. But again, everyone use different ones. There's Perplexity, there's Gemini, there's lots out there. So use whichever you're comfortable with, and or whichever you've got access to. Should the resume include technology skills? We actually discussed that earlier. What was the consensus then, Chris?
Well, I think yes, actually. When you put your core skills, I think if you include some of the systems on there, if you've overseen and project managed an implementation of a new ERP system, then yes, I think that's important to be on there. Otherwise, you don't want to kind of list every single system you've ever had involvement with, but certainly where there's been a pretty significant project where you've kind of implemented a new system, I think yes, I think so. Because again, we do get asked by a client, don't we? First 6 months, they're going to be putting in a new ERP system. So we're looking for evidence of that on a resume. So I think that's really relevant.
Yeah. Okay. One of the questions, how do you manage job search time, e.g. no income? I presume that means a gap in the resume, potentially, or volunteer positions. I think Chris had mentioned that you do need to try and explain gaps where possible. But that can be anything from career break or etc. But yeah, any gaps you'd want to put in there.
If your career's been full-time permanent, you're now looking for either part-time or fractional CFO roles, is something special in your resume? All you can do is highlight your experience to date. I guess if you've had any roles that have been, part-time or consulting, obviously they need to be on there. But I don't know that I've got any pearls of wisdom on how to tailor the resume to kind of align it more towards consulting. I guess in the permanent role, if you've been involved in any kind of projects, that could be good because a lot of interim engagements have got a project focus. I don't know. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we get asked this question all the time about a certain experience, but you can't rewrite history. Your career history is your career history. So if you are transitioning from full-time permanent positions over to either interim or fractional, then that's a different session on how you open those doors. It's possibly not going to be always necessarily the resume. In its first instance, it may be personal connections. It can be the resume, but it's probably you're probably going to be aligned to the sector. I would say that it's sometimes difficult to move from full-time into fractional and have no prior sector knowledge to the company that you're working, who you're going to move into, because other candidates will probably tick a few more of those boxes.
What would resume writing tips be for someone coming to the US who holds a non-CPA designation? a lot of CFOs in the US have an MBA as opposed to a CPA. So I don't think there's any, clients will say, sometimes they'll say, I really want someone who's a CPA. But, more often than not, it's the experience that's important. And they're equally happy with someone who's, MBA qualified. So I guess, if you think about the UK, ACA, ACCA, CIMA, any sort of designation you would put on there. And if you wanted to kind of make the point that it's equivalent to a CPA, then I think that's fine to do. But again, your qualifications are what they are and your professional licenses are what they are. They need to be on there. And I think most people will, accept that this person's got the experience that we need, albeit they're not a US CPA.
Yeah. And one of the other questions was about if you are still sitting the exams. I mean, that's fine, put that in. So you might put sort of CPA and then just a couple of words to describe the status of that.
It's a good point, Victoria. If someone, what are you putting in the gaps? And if there's been a time that's, where you've been unemployed, how do you kind of put that on the resume? I guess it is what it is, isn't it? Some people will take issue with it and think, well, this person's been out of the market for a while and that might be an issue for them, but not everyone thinks that way. And I think, certainly if you've been out because of, I don't know, raising a family or whatever the reason, if it's a sizable amount of time, I think you just kind of put that on there and explain what you've been doing. I personally don't, as long as I know that there's been a gap in what the person's been doing, it doesn't really matter to me, whether they've been unemployed or whatever the reason. But, obviously people have a different thought process on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's case by case to be fair, and if there is a plausible explanation, depends on the length of the gaps, etc. But that's probably the specifics are probably a one-to-one conversation. Moving on to the next point about in the statistics of overwhelming response, how much of that is from offshore, and how does talent screener filter those? I think, talent. We have tried talent filters and things like that, and we haven't found any successful. So, as an organisation, and I can't speak for other organisations, we screen them humanly. Currently, I can't say that won't be the case, but they would have to be able to screen out applications to the same standard that we would do, as in 100%, not 99.9, but 100%. Until that's the case, we're not prepared as an organisation to move across to those. There will be other organisations that are potentially ahead of us or happy to take that risk, and they will set. They should be setting their own filters. For example, if it needs someone who's on site, they may be. Like is indicated there, if someone is offshore, they may screen those out. So again, that comes to having the location on your resume is pretty critical. And then the other questions that pay out to reach to hiring manager versus going through gatekeeper, junior recruiter. Potentially both. It can be. It depends. I mean, it's time versus sort of reward. If you are convinced that you are 100% perfect, ticking every single box for that role and more, then you may want to invest that time and effort into reaching out to individuals. If you wouldn't want to follow up applications where maybe there could be more suitable candidates, because you just need to save your time and energy into the relevant follow-ups. And then how do you balance privacy by not disclosing too much of recent job? I think it's more these sort of statistics that are not in the public domain where you might have to be careful. But if it's in the public domain, then you're not giving anything away that's not already readily available. Putting in who you've worked for, who you're currently working for, who you previously worked for, and things like LinkedIn. That's just factual career history. So there's no issues with any of that. I've never come into any issues unless someone was, sending sets of accounts that shouldn't be published or shouldn't be sent. But I've never come across any issues with you, Chris, where people have been disclosing too much information. I think it's probably just the highlights, and that's not usually an issue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're not asking for, confidential information. It's just the headline, isn't it, about the business?
Yeah.
On the where Ed was asking about offshore response, you can also, when you post a vacancy on LinkedIn or Indeed or any of these job boards, there are boxes that you can tick to filter out any applications for people who haven't got the right to work in the country that the role is advertised in. So there are certain filters you can put on when you're actually advertising the role, which I do because ultimately we're not in a position, a lot of our clients aren't in a position to sponsor people who haven't got right to work. So those numbers were very much without, offshore response.
Okay. And that was a remote position as well. That and the criteria is quite open as well. So it's not that isn't typical. That was just probably like the record.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So I think that sort of covers a lot of the questions. Apologies if there's any that we didn't manage to cover, but just in the interest of time, we'll just sort of start to wrap up. I'm just going to bring you to your attention to some of the resources, and then Chris, do you want me to pass back to you at the end as well? So
yeah.
Okay, let me just bring up. I'm going to share my screen. So, as I mentioned, we will send out some event follow-up, copy a link to the recording when it's available. That'll be tomorrow, and also the prompt template, should you want to use it, the resume template, again, should you want to use that. And then we've also put together a checklist of do's and don'ts. So there's I think it's a one-page document of the highlights so that you can read that list and just maybe match it against how your resume is structured. So just covering a few things here. We have got some excellent job seeking resources on our website. So to find those, this page here, you can just go into for CFOs, and the top drop down is CFO resources. And there's lots of different sort of downloads, advice sheets of all the different sort of parts of a recruitment process and the journey that you could be in finding your next position. We also have our CFO forum as well, which is an online community of CFOs across North America who join, and they join the discussions to talk about work-related issues predominantly. So who's used this system, who's used, who's done this, who's done that, has anyone got any advice on this? So it's just about pooling the knowledge and sharing that. So that is the CFO forum that you can see there. Again, it's available in the drop down, the fourth drop down on the website, and you can join that. There's quite instructions on how to do that. And then for anyone who hasn't already registered with us, if you are on the lookout for opportunities, we always say that it doesn't matter whether you're just passive. You can select your job search criteria. We're not a volume-based organisation, so we wouldn't be hitting you with jobs every 5 minutes. I wish we were, because we'd be pretty rich individuals. But if you want to be on our radar for job opportunities, then you'll find it in the register for CFO jobs. There's a form there where you can put in, and it's quite a lengthy form because that means that you don't get contacted about opportunities that are irrelevant for you. It does only take sort of 5 to 10 minutes to fill out, and then you'll be in our network for potential opportunities. That's it from me. Back to you, Chris. I'll just stop sharing.
Cool. I think that's it. I mean, hopefully we've kind of provided some, interesting food for thought. I'm sure, there's areas there that aren't kind of stuff that you're not already aware of, but sometimes it's good just to have a bit of a refresher and I guess see it from a different perspective because you're applying for positions and maybe not aware of what's going on, in the back end when the resumes are coming through. So I hope it's been useful. If anyone's got any questions and they want to continue, I'm on LinkedIn, email, feel free to contact me and I'll be sending a follow-up email after the session. But yeah, just thank you so much for joining. We appreciate everybody's input. And with that, I wish you all a very good day.